There's a lot of very bad things that can happen. Things might go very, very badly for a lot of people, and particularly vulnerable populations. So, given that, what do we do with that then? It's like, okay, if this is where we're headed, how can the stuff that I know and the stuff that I talk about and the stuff that I write help get us through this and maybe help us to do better next time? Welcome to Ready to Be Strong. I'm Tania Israel.
And I'm Pema Rocker.
Together, we're broadening our minds, opening our hearts,
and strengthening connections in a politically charged election season and beyond. And now we're in the beyond part.
Indeed. We are recording this 4 days after the 2024 election. And so in this episode, we're talking about politics and grief. So let's kick it off. Pema, how are you feeling post-election? Or I don't know if you want to share a little bit about how things were going in the lead up and where you are now.
Okay, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling surprised. I'm feeling empathetic of folks that I know, the varying depths of feeling and loss that folks feel. And because we have done this before in 2016, it feels like less of a surprise, and it feels like maybe we know how, we've got some know-how to be in reaction and to build in ways that we weren't prepared for before. And when I say that, I'm very much relaying that that I voted on the Democratic side, and what might be lost in the same way positions were lost in 2016.
So you're having all the feels.
Well, yeah, I'm having feels, but really what's also there is I've got some measure too. So since this happened before with one of the main players, this happened before with Trump, and it feels like we just kind of drove off a cliff, like, oh my God, how could this happen? Since we have faced that once before, I feel a little bit more measured. Like, yeah, we saw some things change in a very big way. Bigotry got more escalated out in our world, and it seemed like there was a lot of allowance for that, whereas before there wasn't. I'm afraid of that. And also, it feels like we've got some tools that we didn't have before. And the measure that I'm looking at this with, or that my feelings are tempered by, just feels like, okay, what are our tools? What's our reality? I feel like all the folks around me are having different feelings from different angles. How can I listen? And what happens next in the listening?
Yeah. Definitely people are having quite a range of reactions. Yeah, I spent the last week before the election in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, getting out the vote for Kamala. And it was a fascinating experience. It is very different from the world that I live in. It's this town that used to have primarily Irish, Italian, and Polish immigrants who worked in the mines. And now it is a majority Dominican population who's moved there from New York. And so it was such a mix. And I don't know, I feel like it was this very like American story there of that town. And anyway, I talked to a lot of people, and I talked to people who were, voting a variety of ways and who had a lot of different kinds of life experiences and things. So I was really like on the ground in it. I was also doing a ton of media. Everybody wanted to talk to me about like how do you manage election stress, because everybody was like so at the height of activation constantly. And people kept texting me, like friends from California were like, "So what's going on there? Like, are we going to win?" And I was like, I literally have no idea. Like, I did not go into this hopeful. I did not go into this not hopeful. I was just like, I literally do not know how this is going to turn out based on what I'm hearing from people. I think it could go any direction. I was together with other people who were, on the ground getting out the vote. I was also involved in some election day and election night coverage when people wanted to talk about, like, how do we have conversations with people after the election. So I was really, really busy, which was great for me because that's one of the ways that I deal with stress is I'm like, what can I do? And then when it became clear, that things were going toward Trump on election night, I was like, oh, wow. So there was sadness, I've been feeling a lot of loss around that. And I will admit, like, as a biracial Asian American woman, I'm like, oh, I just thought Kamala was great and is great. And I think that she did an amazing job on a campaign in a short period of time. And yeah, there's huge disappointment. Even
Mhm.
though I didn't quite allow myself to hope for it, I'm really sad. And
Mhm.
I don't know, since then I've been going through a lot of different things and, some of which has to do with various analyses that I've come up with about what happened here. And we can get into some of that. But it's been, yeah, I'm basically okay. It does feel different from 2016 because it feels like, I mean, we were at such a level of stress leading up to the election. And I think a lot of that was not knowing. And now we know.
I'm hearing your commitment, your active actioning dedication to both the politics that you believe in out there canvassing for Kamala Harris. And then I also hear, these past several months that we've been doing this podcast and before, your absolute dedication to, narrowing this divide, this divided nation. I'm struck by and curious about you holding those two batons or kind of standing in those two places. I really appreciate how you can hold the space for all of that. You have equal dedication to both, in my words, the fight and also the union.
And I guess I don't find those at odds because, frankly, now we get a little bit into my analysis. I think one of the things that's really challenging for the Democrats is I feel like there's a lot we don't understand about a whole bunch of people in this country. And I'm not talking about like the Democratic Party or, the people running for office. I mean like the on the ground, like people who are Democrats and people on the left and people who are progressive. There's a lot that we're not getting, or at least that some of us aren't getting about those other folks who, the folks who voted for Trump. And I don't think that means we need to change our agenda to accommodate. Like, it's not about a moving our ideas toward the middle. It's actually, I mean, I think about approaching other people with more humility, with more kindness, that when people aren't quite where we are in terms of the way we're thinking about, changing things, like like more expansive understandings of gender, it takes people a minute to catch up with that. And I feel like there's been a lot of intolerance for people who aren't exactly where we are. And I don't mean, the anti-trans policies. I don't mean that. Like, I don't mean tolerating that. I mean not necessarily labeling everyone as haters who isn't on the same page as we are. The evidence says that that's not true. The evidence says we overestimate how much the other side feels hate toward us and how much they dehumanize us. And so our messages about, they hate, they are ignorant, there's a lot that, they are driven by fear. I mean, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying it's equally true of our side, you know? Like, people are like, "Oh, they're really making their decisions based on fear." And then what everyone I'm talking to says is, "Oh my God, I'm terrified." It's like we're all feeling the fear. We're all kind of ignorant about what's going on with the other side in some ways. And so I kind of see it really working in concert because I feel like, you know, m- one of the things that I'm very committed to is our democracy. And that's one of the things that concerns me most about what might happen during this Trump administration is a real erosion of democracy. And I feel like ideally the Democrats would shore up democracy, but I also feel like we're not going to have the opportunity to do that if we don't also put forward some more attempt to understand and show some kindness toward other people. I don't know. Does that help make sense of it?
Oh yeah. I mean the brushstrokes are broad. I feel like you can say that, we can say that about every spot on the spectrum. It feels
Mhm.
like it's true. And also, I'm hearing over and over again and feeling the depth of your vote just potentially costs me my life. You know, anti trans policies, increased bigotry, violence. And we've had conversations where not everyone is violent, and yet violent things happen. After 2016, I think that hate crimes increased.
Mm.
So I'm like, I'm hearing and seeing people upset about how it looks like, yes, your individual vote potentially costs me my safety. And I'm also hearing from our conversations and learning that that is not necessarily true. I think that what you're saying can be spread across an entire spectrum of voters. I feel like this election has shown us the many, many different, like we might be polarized in a divided nation, but it feels like there are many more divisions in our each sides than two poles. I'm talking about right now a statistic that I read this morning about Missouri had like 12% of people voted both for Trump and for abortion rights.
Mhm.
So the feeling like that you're sharing can be spread across the entire spectrum. And yet it just feels so personal. You know,
Yeah.
the losses of those potential losses to autonomy feel very personal.
I have to say that the thing that's really clear is that a lot of the American public does not want what the Democrats are selling, you know? And I'm like, "Okay, it's what I want, but there's something I should try to understand about people who don't want it or who didn't vote for it, because otherwise, I don't know, we're just gonna like, the more we kind of double down on our misunderstandings and misperceptions of the other side and our distancing, then the less chance we have of not just winning, but the less chance we have of advocating for things that are in the broad interests of Americans and that people are looking for.
We've got this consideration here, what's helping us right now? And I'm also thinking about the title of our podcast, Ready to Be Strong. So I came into our podcast thinking, yeah, let's be strong. Let's strengthen ourselves internally so that we can hear each other out and make some connected choices together. And on the other side of the election, I'm thinking, right, how can we be ready to be strong? How is it different now? How's that consideration different?
I think it's even more important that we come together and rise to our potential. And that's really what Ready to Be Strong is about. Like, how do we strengthen ourselves individually and collectively to do our best? And right now, I mean, people are grieving, and that's really, this is your jam. This is your area of expertise. This is what I'm seeing so much. So I have to say, like, I'm not like, today everybody must do this. Because what I'm realizing is that there's a lot that can happen right now as people are grieving where we can further alienate people. I mean, our own people, our other people, because we are in a lot of different feelings and in a lot of different understandings of what happened. So, what I think is most helpful is not to try to direct that too much toward other people, to my rule about grief is that I should forgive everyone everything that they do when they
Mm,
are grieving.
mm,
It's just coming out of a lot of feelings. And
mhm,
so I'm recognizing in this, I've got my own feelings about stuff that are really incompatible with the feelings that some people around me are having. And it's hard making space for incompatible feelings. So anyway, that's sort of my thought about, like, yes, there are things to do to move forward in the ready to be strong mode. I think that maybe the most important thing to do right now is to try to allow people to have different reactions and allow space for that. But I'm curious, like, from a grief perspective, like, what's your take on what's going on now for you and others?
Well, I heard you say two things that ring true for me when I think about grief, and one of them is this perception I always have every single time there's going to be that there's a loss or a trauma. I think, like, individually, in family and community, I think, okay, we've lost someone, something terrible has happened to all of us. Everybody's going to be on their best behavior to recognize that this is hard and how can we help. But that is never true. That's never true. It's not true for me. It's not true for others that I engage with, because we're we're all messed up somehow by our loss, our feelings. And even if we've got it all, if even if I have it all together over in this one category of my life, I'm really messing up in another category. And maybe I shouldn't use that phrase, messing up, but I'm not behaving as as kindly or as aware as I could behave in other times. And the other thing it makes me, that what you say brings to mind, is to listen. So, you know, we've been talking for several months now about really listening. How do we
Mhm.
activate our listening so we can hear people on the other side, and so that our listening can hopefully maybe make space for people that we're talking to on the other side to listen to us, to feel safe to hear us as well. And when someone has experienced loss, I feel like the very first level, all I can do is listen. I have a recent experience of a dear friend who went through a really big loss, and I found myself listening to her express her grief, and I sat with it for a minute at a time, and then I would offer her a solution. Have you thought about XYZ? And then she would share more. Well, have you thought about ABC? And then she would share more. And then after our call was done, I just thought, Pema, you just tried to action your way through her absolute loss.
Mm.
And so I got back in contact with her and I just said, I'm really sorry. I that was a time for me to just be with you in your pain and listen. And I offered all these solutions instead.
Mhm.
And in some cases, solutions are really, really helpful. And especially at the beginning of a loss, just being present with somebody as they feel their pain is kind of the way to go.
Yeah.
And right now feels like a time to listen to each other, which reminds me of another topic that you brought up in earlier conversations about this divide that we're in and strengthening ourselves inside of it, which is, we're not only less divided than we think that we are, we're more diverse than we think we are. We represent more intersections, each of us individually, than we think of the other person. So if you're a Democrat, listen to your Democrat friends and see how different they are from you. And so, in this moment of loss, if that's what you're feeling, listen to the other people who are also feeling loss. And I wonder how much that would change actions going forward if we really did have the skill to listen. I do think it's a skill that we don't necessarily have, and that we're presented with an opportunity to practice our skill in grief, our skill in listening.
Yeah.
And that's like my big driving question all the time is, How much capacity do I have here? And if I feel like I don't have a lot of capacity, at least maybe I can listen and then hear what might come next.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we hear, you're saying that the political divide and grief both have this thing in common, which is that listening can be healing in a way. And they also have this thing in common where if everybody's experiencing the division and everyone's experiencing the healing, listening to someone else's that's different from yours may really rub you the wrong way. And it can be harder to listen when you are experiencing your own pain, and especially if you feel like your pain is somehow caused by the person you're listening to, or people like them. So one of the things I recognized for myself, and I knew this like on Wednesday, I was like, the thing I'm going to need to keep in mind is I tend to move too quickly from grieving to action. And not everybody's going to be there. I'm not, like I need to give people around me more time for the grieving than I'm going to want to. So I recognize that. So I think that insight about ourselves is really helpful to kind of know, like Pema, you talked about, like, this is what my own process is like. I go, like, you've shared that with me, like, okay, I go through these, steps. And so I think for us to know what we tend to do. And the other thing that I noticed is that when then I was sort of in this, like, I was hearing a lot of people around me who have more privilege and who were, feeling really angry about people who voted for Trump and like, well, they're going to get what they deserve. And the thing I was feeling was like, okay, the self righteousness of people on the left is not going to help us win the next time either. And so I was feeling really grumpy with, those people around, because I was like, "Oh, it's exactly this that created the situation we're in." You know what I'm hearing from you. And then when I recognized that, I was like, "Oh, my analysis of the situation, it's really just a form of grief. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what caused this and how do we keep this from happening next time?" And that made me, like, really direct my upsetness about this toward, I mean, really largely people who surround me in my life. But once I recognized that, then I could not just flip into that so easily. So I think that there's, even before we get to engaging with other people, or maybe in concert with engaging with other people, having that awareness of what we're doing ourselves. What's our process and how is that playing out in our actions and our feelings?
I have watched lots of folks over a course of a lifetime enact grief through court battles, military strikes, legislation. I have often like fighting back at each other rather than saying, oh, 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 I'm feeling something here. And it's really painful. And if I am alone in my grief by myself over here, just feeling it, it's a whole lot worse than striking out or trying to make somebody else be responsible for it. But when I notice that that's a compulsion to put my grief on somebody else, then that feels like an indicator too. Like, okay, if you care about how this goes for yourself and other people, then take a break or go find somebody to take a walk with that you trust. Sometimes, like if it's not a problem for you, overeat today. You know what I mean? Like allow yourself some space and soothing so that you don't take it out on other people.
And it's not that we shouldn't take any actions. It's not that we should, like, just make room for your feelings for the next 4 years. I don't think that's the answer. But I do think it's helpful for us to notice what's going on for us and how that's affecting what we're doing in this moment, so that we can really be smart about what we're going to do in the next moment. And when we are ready for action, to bring that forth from a place that is grounded.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking a little bit about, while we're in it, having some awareness, having some listening, giving some space. Let's think about, what comes next. And do we have some thoughts, some guidance about where to go from here? So, what you got, Pema?
So, something that has gone around in my head like an earworm in the past week, Tanya, has been a quote that you speak of from Rent, which is the musical Rent, which is the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation.
Mhm.
And I have been thinking, okay, here we are in the loss phase, here we are in the listening phase, here we are in the deep, painful feeling phase. And I think about creation. What do we create when what do we create now? And I have been thinking, what do I create right here in my home? On election night, I couldn't listen to or watch the news. My poor partner was all set to and even wanted to invite some people over. And I was like, oh, I'm so sensitive right now. I don't think I can handle that. And so for me, in those moments, I created some separation from that input and from that loud input when I knew that I would find out the result later. What do I want to create in my neighborhood? I got to walk next door a couple days before and see my neighbor in her hilarious dinosaur costume.
Mm,
I got to spend some time with some dear friends, even for just 30 minutes, by having them over to see what my kind of new floor and rug looked like, and then we got to talk about some old stories of feeling and loss. And I got to give them my book that recently came out in print.
mm,
That's Ash and Spirit. And I got to tell them a story that I tell that I actually don't tell in the book but that shows up in the dedication. They asked me, "Where does that come from?" And they had never heard me share that before. It's really sweet. And so I realized, "Oh, look at this. Here's something that I created from the loss that I experienced as I was trying to have an understanding of this loss. A book got created out of it. And then community got created out of my efforts. And then many moons later, this conversation got created out of it." So I'm curious about what are we creating both locally in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and for each other as we're trying to bridge where we're standing in loss to where we need to support ourselves in
yeah.
this new environment.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought creativity into it because one of the things I was really struggling on Wednesday, I was like, is there something, anything helpful that I could post on Facebook? I'm like, I sort of feel like I didn't post all my pictures of my canvassing that I was doing, like to get out the vote on election day. Like I waited too long. And now I'm like, well, now I can never post these pictures. Like I can't post joyful pictures with all my get out the vote stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do that. Like, what am I gonna should I just stay quiet? But is there something I feel like a lot of people were texting me and like, "Hey, how are you doing?" But then also, people who wanted to know like, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And somebody sent me a poem via text and I was like, it took me a little while to track down who wrote the poem because I was like, I'm not going to post it without, crediting it appropriately. But then I found it and I posted it on my Facebook and so many people are like, "Thank you. This is helpful." I mean, a ton of people were posting poetry. And that really struck me because, yes, we could have been posting all kinds of analyses of things and all of this stuff, but people posted poetry. And then when I was kind of in a funky place with all this, and I was like, I don't know how to unearth the feelings that I'm having. And a friend had posted this beautiful song on Facebook, and I was like, oh, this song really brings forth my emotion, and that's something I need. I need this art to create a space for me to have my feelings. So
Hmm.
I think art is so valuable right now.
Hmm. I feel like that art is kind of like a campfire that we can all hold our hands around, like warm our hands. I feel like poetry speaks for us when we can't speak or when we don't have the words for it. Music does the same thing. I love that among your friends sending you texts and asking how you're doing right after that, a friend sent you some poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think about, okay, we are processing emotions right now. And yeah, around our country, there's a lot of different emotions that people are processing. I mean, frankly, in my world, I'm not hearing any of the celebration or even relief of the other side, but someone did say to me today that they had talked to somebody who was like, because they were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm feeling so crushed right now and so like my government does not represent me, and all these things." And someone said, "Yeah, well, how do you think I've been feeling the last 4 years?" And it's like, oh, okay. Which it sounds shocking. I remember people saying that, when Obama was in office and, after Obama wasn't in office and Trump was in office, people who felt like, oh, yeah, I've been feeling like my rights have not been attended to and my life has not been considered in these past 8 years. And now you're getting a taste of that. So there is something there where I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know what it's been like for people, for a lot of people these last 4 years, if they didn't feel like their values were represented by the government or at least by the federal government. And so this is where I'm like, okay, there's some opportunity for understanding when we have these conversations with people and when someone's like, yeah, well, this is how I was feeling, rather than being like, what? Like what on earth? I can't even imagine that because that's not been my experience. To be like, oh, what have I been missing? Like what have you been experiencing that I didn't really understand? And I think that there's a lot of possible opening for that. Again, doesn't have to be this week, doesn't have to be this month, although we got holidays coming up where people are going to be with family and maybe people who are in a different place. And sure, we can sit around, we can argue about stuff and we can, express our hurt and our upsetness at each other. We can also, like, people can rub it in if they feel like their side won. But what if we really instead took those opportunities to say, what this election really makes clear is that we we aren't all on the same page in this country. And if we can each reflect on what is it that we just don't get about where other people are coming from. Like if you were like, I don't understand why Kamala Harris would want the government to be paying for people to transition their gender, in prison. Like if you didn't understand that, wow, I bet you could ask somebody who does understand that and who agreed with that. If you don't understand how somebody who, is an immigrant could vote for Trump, who wants to, build the wall higher and deport people, okay, I bet somebody could help you to understand that. It's like there are things that seem so unfathomable to people in this country about how the other side is thinking about things. I would love it if we recognized where we're feeling so disconnected because we just can't understand. And then when we have the opportunity to find out more, and even more so than talking about the issues, because I do feel like, there was like, oh, well, there's, the issue of the economy and there's the issue of immigrant rights. And there's all of these different issues, but I feel like some of it really comes down to understanding what kind of community do you want to live in? Like, what feels comfortable to you? What kind of a country feels comfortable to you? Because I think that there's a lot where there's different things that feel comfortable and feel like they make people belong. And if we could understand that a little bit better, I think we would go a long way toward healing some of the ruptures.
I think that that sounds ideal. I just, as I heard you say all that, I was thinking, oh, wouldn't it be fun that if okay, so we have a pre-election season, we have election season, and wouldn't it be fun that in post-election season, we all play the game of, okay, what do you, what are you feeling? Why do you think that? Like the post-election season is all curiosity. It's the game of curiosity. How many data points can you collect from the people that you listen to? Well, wouldn't that be ideal if we all wanted to know that kind of thing? And I think that some people want to know and other people just don't. Folks are either distracted or they're of a totally different mindset. And so I'm hearing myself say all that and it feels very pessimistic. And then I just think, all right, we'll just The more people that accrue in curiosity, the more curiosity makes a difference.
Yeah. So grieve and create and cultivate curiosity and listen.
Yeah, those sound like really good places to be right now.
I'm Tania Israel, professor, psychologist, and author of Facing the Fracture.
And I'm Pema Rocker, creative coach and author of Ash and Spirit.
Make your choice.
Are you ready to be strong?
Ready to Be Strong was created by me, Tania Israel,
And me, Pema Rocker.
and edited by Haley Gray. Our theme music is by Jeff Murcell at Premium Beat.
Bring this conversation into your circles. Rate and review the show wherever you're listening. And most importantly, share this episode with a friend.